Hi there, welcome to the Healing Migraines Naturally podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Leslie Caesar, and I'm a licensed naturopathic doctor, former chronic migraine sufferer, and I have dedicated my life to helping other women with chronic migraines and headaches rediscover a migraine-free life. So welcome to the podcast today. Today we're going to talk about mold exposure and migraines. Within the natural medicine industry, this is becoming more and more of a hot topic. Mold exposure, and is that the cause of people's symptoms? Okay, so I've talked a little bit about some of the way that the natural medicine industry sort of operates on other podcasts. We'll link to those in the description, but there are some problems with the natural medicine industry. Okay, I'm just going to be very frank with you. And so one of those problems with the natural medicine industry is that when there's a new testing technology that is developed, many times the natural medicine industry will sort of generate a fad diagnosis from that. You have laboratories that are sort of performing standard laboratory testing, and then you have what are called specialty laboratories or specialty lab companies that perform laboratory tests that are, you could say, non-conventional. I hate to use the term experimental because I don't think that really captures it, but they are laboratory tests that are not necessarily highly validated. Okay, so conventional lab work. So this would be the lab work that your medical doctor orders, your neurologist orders, your gynecologist orders for you, that is run in like a Quest Diagnostics or a LabCorp or in your doctor's office, sent to, the hospital and run. Those are conventional labs. These are things like checking your red blood cells and your iron levels, your hemoglobin levels, your white blood cells, your cholesterol, right? Those types of standard labs that your insurance usually covers. Those labs are highly standardized, and the results and the methodology that they use to run those tests have been validated to the highest degree. When you get your blood drawn and they're going to check your red blood cell count and your hemoglobin level, the methodology that they use to determine those values and the quality control, all of the procedures around it are highly, highly validated, and you have very good confidence that the result that you're getting is an accurate result. Certainly, sometimes there are errors made by laboratories. That can definitely happen, but those are, not very common. They're not routinely made, and it's not the norm. Within the specialty lab area, the processes, the results, the methodology can vary widely from laboratory to laboratory. The results may not be consistent, even within the same laboratory. People have tested this. They've drawn blood from a patient and they've kind of divided it into two samples and set both into the lab, specialty lab, but maybe put a different name on one of them and gotten two different results from the same blood work that they sent in. So it's actually a problem within the natural medicine industry that some of these specialty labs results are inconsistent, the methodologies are not proven. They're constantly developing sort of new technology and new assays and new things that they can test, and then those are marketed to the natural medicine practitioners as sort of like, oh, we've got like a test that can identify, the smoking gun, the root cause. And so a lot of practitioners will kind of jump on that bandwagon, and then it becomes like a fad, like a trend, like, oh my goodness, we need to check you for this, right? Because this is the thing, the hidden thing that might be causing everything. We got to test for it. We now have a test that we can determine this, and so let's run this test. Okay, so mold is one of these trending areas. Within the past, say maybe, 15, 20 years, these specialty labs have developed new specialty tests that can detect mold toxins or metabolic byproducts that your body generates, potentially when you've been exposed to mold. This is relatively new testing. I mean, if I'm saying it's been around for 15, 20 years, that seems like a long time, but compared to like the laboratory testing that checks your hemoglobin, mold testing, I hate to tell you, is one of these sort of relatively newer laboratory technologies, and a lot of people have kind of jumped on the bandwagon. I think that this has a lot to do why considering, is it the mold that's making me sick? I think that it has a lot to do with why people are talking more and more about mold these days. I think it's really being driven more by the specialty laboratory companies marketing this to natural medicine practitioners, functional medicine doctors, chiropractors, naturopathic doctors, acupuncturists, health coaches, right? All of these things. Now they're marketing direct to consumer, right? You yourself can order a lot of specialty labs just on the internet. They want to sell their product. I think that's what's driving a lot of the interest in, is it mold that's making me sick? Hi there. I want to jump in real quick and tell you about my client Beth. She was getting 15 to 20 migraines and headaches per month. And as you can imagine, this was impacting her work performance and her confidence. She also has 2 small children, and she was starting to feel like she was a horrible mom because she had nothing left for them at the end of the day. But she reached out and she booked a free consult call with me, and after I asked her about her migraines and her health history, I felt confident that I could help her. I help women uncover the root drivers of their migraines and follow a step-by-step plan to dramatically reduce the frequency by up to 90% without adding more medication or taking a bunch of supplements. So we built her personal migraine map, followed the plan, and now she will get 1 to 2 migraines per year, which she uses ibuprofen to treat if she needs to, versus up to 15 to 20 per month when we first started working together that weren't responding well to any medication. She just reached out to tell me that she got a promotion at work, she's on top of her career again, and has been able to come off all of her migraine medication. But most importantly, she's a confident mom again, and she's attending birthday parties at Jump Zone with her kids and saying yes instead of saying maybe later. I've worked with women like Beth from all over the United States who were told, this is the best we can do, but they were still willing to dig deeper. So if you're serious about changing your migraine story, go to drlesliecaesar.com/apply or tap the link in the show notes. And on our free consult, we'll map out why your migraines keep coming back and the first 3 steps you can take over the next 30 days. I do cap new client spots each month, so if the calendar is full, the doors are closed for now. But if you're done feeling helpless and ready to do the work to heal, pause this episode for 30 seconds and book that consult call now. Let's dive in a little bit into the issue around mold. I mean, mold exists in the natural environment. We humans have been exposed to mold since the dawn of time. And in fact, in America, we are probably exposed to the least amount of mold than any other human group in the history of humans, okay? Here in America, we actually live in a much more sterile environment than is typical. Our entire body is coated with bacteria and viruses and little mold organisms. Our bodies consist of somewhere between 30 and 40 trillion cells. They now have determined that we highly likely have even more bacteria cells on us than our actual cells. Okay, so it really starting to question, like, what are we? Are we ourselves, or are we like a carrier for bacteria? It's a little strange to think about. Suddenly out of the blue, when we are living in like relatively sterile environment, okay, now suddenly mold is the issue. I mean, let's kind of think this through a little bit here. Okay, so this is why I say, how is it that we in this country, again, I'm not saying that, there is no issue with mold. There's definitely an issue with mold, but I think it's a little interesting, a little funny that we living in the environment that most of us are living in, that's pretty pristine and like the least amount of mold that any humans have ever lived in since the dawn of time, and now all of a sudden we're really concerned about mold. Okay, it just doesn't make sense. But I know that all of these specialty laboratory companies have developed these mold tests, and they want to sell these tests. Okay, and this hasn't just happened with mold testing. This has happened with SIBO testing. This happened with food sensitivity testing 25 years ago. Like, I've been in this industry long enough to see the trends and see the patterns, and it's happened enough where I'm like, okay, this is definitely a pattern where they develop new laboratory technology in the specialty lab area, and then now suddenly everybody's being told, you need to take this test because this is a problem. This is we're going to detect the actual problem, right? So that's the first thing that I would say about mold exposure, okay, that I think for most of us, it's not something that we need to worry about. There are definitely situations, right, where our home could be turned into a greenhouse for mold. We can be exposed to mold when that happens. Okay. Or, again, something went wrong when they were constructing the building that we work in and there isn't proper ventilation, right? Or, something happened, they put the siding or the stucco on wrong on our home and now there's a problem, right? These are very real things. The other way that we can be exposed to mold is through the food that we eat. Okay, so mold, again, it's naturally occurring. It's going to grow on food, food that we eat. Okay, so mold has been growing on the food that humans eat since the dawn of time, right? I mean, definitely, agriculture, right? When we started perfecting agriculture, we're growing food and then we're storing it, and then depending on the conditions that it's being stored, it can be in an environment where mold is going to flourish. That can definitely be an exposure that people can have through the food that they're eating. And there are certain foods that have become, like, people are afraid to eat now because we've been told that they are de facto, contaminated with mold. So like peanuts is one of those foods where a lot of people are afraid to eat it now because they are afraid that it has been mold contaminated. So I think, and what I tell my clients is, your fear of mold, I think, is a little unfounded, and in fact, I think it's been almost exploited in order to sell products within the natural medicine industry. So I think a lot of people are more fearful of mold either in their home, their workplace, on their food, etc., than really they need to be. Okay, I think, like I say, it's a lot less exposure than most humans since the dawn of time. Like, wouldn't have dreamed of being in this type of like mold-free, relatively like nearly sterile environment that we live in right now. So let's talk about if you're actually exposed to mold, right? So these situations where, there is a catastrophe and you are exposed to mold, your home did turn into a mold greenhouse and you're exposed to it, you did eat some food that was excessively contaminated with mold, okay, what's going to happen, right? So mold, there are tons of different species of mold. I'm not a mold specialist. I couldn't tell you how many species of mold there are, but there are a lot of different species of mold. So any living organism produces metabolic waste material, okay? Any living organism, they have their biochemical processes, they have the things that they do, and when they do those things, they're going to generate waste material. We generate metabolic waste material. Mold generates metabolic waste material. Some people call these things toxins, okay? So within the realm of mold, there is a term called mycotoxins, okay? So myco means mold, toxins mean toxins. All mold is going to produce some metabolic waste material. They do their metabolism. They're going to generate their waste material. Some waste material is more toxic to us than other waste material. Just like some plants, all plants have phytotoxins or plant toxins in them. Some plant toxins or phytotoxins, if we eat them, we're going to die. And some phytotoxins, we eat them and we actually convert them into nutrients, beneficial nutrients. I've talked about this phenomenon on the podcast too. So mycotoxins or mold toxins, I'm not aware of any benefits to mycotoxins like there are to plant toxins. Some toxins that molds produce are more toxic to us humans and can cause a lot of extreme toxicity symptoms. So when we talk about being exposed to mold, so basically let's say we eat something that has mold in it, like some food that has some mold growing on it. When we consume that mold, we're going to consume the toxins, the metabolic byproducts, the mycotoxins that mold has created as part of its normal metabolism. We're going to eat that. We're going to absorb that into our body. If our home is full of mold, we're going to breathe in the mycotoxins that the mold is generating. If there's, mold on the wall in our bathroom and we touch that, there's a potential that we could absorb some of those mycotoxins or mold metabolic byproducts through the skin. Okay, we can breathe these things in. That's going to get absorbed into my bloodstream through my mucous membranes in my nose. Okay? If I cannot break that toxin down, if I cannot detoxify that toxin, I'm going to experience toxicity symptoms. So the way that we talk about this, we talk about that the mold toxin is making us sick. This is not entirely accurate, okay? When you look at the symptoms of mold toxicity, those symptoms are present whenever someone has any sort of toxin overload in the body, okay? So common symptoms of mold exposure, mycotoxin exposure, right? Common symptoms that people will say the mold is making you sick. Allergies, extreme allergy response. So the nose is running. There's a ton of nasal discharge. There's sneezing. There's postnasal drip. There's, congestion. There's sinus pain. There's bags under the eyes. The eyes are watering, okay? Various, what we might call allergy symptoms is a common symptom picture that people will say, this is a mold problem, okay? So you're going to have those symptoms when you have any sort of toxin overload in the body, not just a mycotoxin overload, but any sort of metabolic waste material or toxin overload in the body, you're going to have those symptoms. Another common symptom is brain fog. Okay, got that mold in my bathroom and I've been breathing that in and now I have a lot of brain fog. Well, it's highly likely that someone would develop brain fog if they have any sort of toxin overload within their body, not just a mycotoxin overload, but any sort of toxin overload in their body. Joint pain and stiffness, muscle soreness. So again, people say, you got joint pain and stiffness? Mycotoxins, we need to check, okay? Again, you're going to have joint pain and stiffness and muscle stiffness, muscle pain, tightness, right? When I get out of bed, I'm all stiff. I got to loosen things up. My joints are creaking. Arthritis, okay? These are toxicity symptoms, and you can develop those symptoms with any sort of toxin overload within the body, not just mycotoxins. Another common mycotoxin symptom that people are told are skin conditions, hives, eczema, mysterious rashes, my skin, I can't see anything on my skin, but my skin is itching all the time. You might have mold exposure. Let's get it checked. Again, those skin symptoms are textbook toxicity symptoms. They're symptoms that anyone might experience if they have a toxin overload within their body, not just a mycotoxin overload, but any sort of toxin overload. Now we're going to get to headaches and migraines. So again, you've been exposed to mold? That can cause headaches and migraines. We need to get that tested. Your migraines and headaches might be from mold. We better test that. Like I've talked about on the podcast, anytime you have a toxin overload in your body, it's highly likely that you're going to have head pain, whether it be like a headache or a migraine level. It's textbook toxicity symptom, okay? So, people are talking about mold and they're saying you could be exposed to mold if you have these symptoms. They're not mold toxicity symptoms. They're any type of toxicity symptom. You could have those symptoms, okay? So what is more likely happening to people, okay, is their body is already overloaded with metabolic waste material that they've made themselves, and then other toxins from the environment that are either naturally occurring or man-made. Remember, not all toxins, not all environmental toxins are man-made, right? When we hear the word toxin, we're immediately thinking of like pesticides and plastics and things that we humans have made and put into the environment. But the natural environment is naturally full of all kinds of toxins, okay? That's why we have our organs of detoxification, because we're making toxins all the time through our normal metabolism. We're exposed to naturally occurring toxins in the environment. We could not have made any of this, and we still need to detoxify, okay? That's why we have a liver. That's why we have our kidneys, right? We have the biochemistry to process these toxin molecules, detoxify them, and then eliminate them from the body. This has had to happen since the dawn of time. Okay, this is not a new thing just because there's mold in my home and we made pesticides. Okay, this is all normal stuff. That's why we have the ability to detoxify this stuff. So the mold that we are exposed to today, right, is no different than the mold we were exposed to in yesteryear. Okay, we've always been exposed to mold. Our body has the ability to detoxify and eliminate mycotoxins from our body. Okay, this is not like new stuff. This is stuff we've had to do since the dawn of time. I hope that this puts mold toxicity into a little bit more of a perspective. If I'm already overloaded with toxins, which, newsflash, most Americans are already overloaded with toxins. They are already not feeling well, okay? They already have toxicity symptoms. They just don't know it because people don't know how to identify low-level toxicity symptoms. The toxicity symptoms that start to develop before the migraines develop, okay? This is very important. I'll give you a personal example, okay? So like I've talked about before on the podcast, allergies are actually a toxicity symptom. So by the time I was, 14, 15 years old, in the springtime, I would develop severe seasonal allergies, so severe that I would get like spontaneous nosebleeds sitting in class in high school. Okay, my nasal passages were so irritated and inflamed that they would just, I would just get these spontaneous nosebleeds. And by the time I was about 16, I was administering allergy shots to myself because these extreme allergies, my parents took me to an allergist, and that's what they recommended. And this was all written off as, well, your father has allergies, so I guess this is genetic and, hope for the best, right? So what we didn't know, what my parents didn't know, what I didn't know, what most people don't know, is that allergies are a early toxicity symptom. So it's a symptom that the body will start to generate when the overload starts to happen. Okay, but because nobody recognizes that, they just take, Allegra, Zyrtec, allergy shots, Benadryl, whatever it is, and just try to suppress the symptoms. The problem continues, and then lo and behold, 10 years later, I'm getting migraines. How'd that happen? Where'd this come from? Out of the blue, right? Again, like I've talked about, migraines are a significant toxicity symptom. So seasonal allergies, as bad as mine were, that's like the canary in the coal mine type toxicity symptom, and then, you continue that for 10 years and boom, now you've got migraines. How'd that happen, right? So let's say you've already got seasonal allergies, and then you've got a leak in your bathroom, some mold starts to grow. It doesn't even have to be like the horrible, like some species of mold, they generate like really, really strong toxins. Okay, you really don't want to be exposed to those. But those actually aren't that common. Like you can have black colored mold in your bathroom, and it's not actually like the really, really bad for you black mold. It's just a mold that happens to be black. And yeah, it's going to make toxins like all molds do, but those aren't even that toxic. Okay, that is usually the case when people see like something black mold in their house. It's not actually like that horrible, really super toxic black mold. But then, it's growing in your bathroom and you're like, oh no, I didn't know this was here. Now that I can see it, this was probably growing for 6 months, behind the drywall, but now I can actually see, oh my goodness, for 6 months I've been breathing this in. And slowly over the last 6 months, I've been feeling worse and worse. My allergies have gotten really bad. I've been starting to get headaches, right? Oh my goodness, this mold is causing my headaches, right? It's not that, okay? You were already overloaded. You already had allergies. Now we're bringing in additional toxin material. You're further overloading yourself, okay? So it's not that the mold is the cause. The mold was the final straw on the camel's back that filled your toxin bucket up full enough where now it's so full that now you're getting headaches and migraines, okay? But we don't see it that way. We see, oh my goodness, I didn't start getting headaches until this mold appeared. This mold is making me sick, right? What we don't realize is our toxin bucket was starting to fill up and get really close to the top, and we had a lot of early warning signals, but we didn't realize it. But now it's the mold that caused the migraines, right? That's how we look at things. Again, is it the mold or is it just the final straw, right, that kind of tipped you over, and now it's the toxin overload within your body is even more severe, okay? So in most cases, when people are exposed to mold, that's actually the case. It's not really the mold per se. It's the mold was like the final straw on the camel's back that generated an even more severe overload where now it's like really noticeable, because we don't, again, when we wake up and our muscles are sore and our joints are hurting and we're all stiff and it takes a half hour of loosening up before we feel good, we don't think, oh my goodness, I'm developing a toxin overload in my body. We think, oh, I'm getting older. Oh yeah, well, aging, can't stop aging. Oh boy, that's what we think, right? But then we have a little mold exposure and oh my goodness, my mold is causing all of these problems. What is further exacerbating this, like I say, is that these specialty labs have developed the technology to test for different markers within the blood that indicate a mold exposure. Hi there, I want to jump in real quick and tell you about my client Beth. She was getting 15 to 20 migraines and headaches per month, and as you can imagine, this was impacting her work performance and her confidence. She also has 2 small children, and she was starting to feel like she was a horrible mom because she had nothing left for them at the end of the day. But she reached out and she booked a free consult call with me, and after I asked her about her migraines and her health history, I felt confident that I could help her. I help women uncover the root drivers of their migraines and follow a step-by-step plan to dramatically reduce the frequency by up to 90% without adding more medication or taking a bunch of supplements. So we built her personal migraine map, followed the plan, and now she will get 1 to 2 migraines per year, which she uses ibuprofen to treat if she needs to, versus up to 15 to 20 per month when we first started working together that weren't responding well to any medication. She just reached out to tell me that she got a promotion at work, she's on top of her career again, and has been able to come off all of her migraine medication. But most importantly, she's a confident mom again, and she's attending birthday parties at Jump Zone with her kids and saying yes instead of saying maybe later. I've worked with women like Beth from all over the United States who were told, this is the best we can do, but they were still willing to dig deeper. So if you're serious about changing your migraine story, go to drlesliecaesar.com/apply or tap the link in the show notes, and on our free consult, we'll map out why your migraines keep coming back and the first 3 steps you can take over the next 30 days. I do cap new client spots each month, so if the calendar is full, the doors are closed for now. But if you're done feeling helpless and ready to do the work to heal, pause this episode for 30 seconds and book that consult call now. So within the conventional or standard labs, like if you went to an allergist and said, I think I've been exposed to mold, your allergist is going to order a standard lab or conventional lab that's going to look for an immune system response to the mold. So it's more like allergy testing to the mold. That's what like an allergist is going to order. And that lab, because it's a standard lab or a conventional lab, the method behind it, the consistency behind it, the procedures that the laboratory technician is going to use to determine the results is going to be very standardized, very consistent, and it's a very high likelihood that the result that you get is going to be accurate for what it's testing. Again, you have developed allergies to it because you've been exposed, your liver can't clear the toxins, and now your immune system is trying to help out to solve the problem. That's another rabbit hole that I won't go down right now. But that type of testing is what would be done if you went into like a medical doctor allergist and asked for testing around mold. If you go into a natural practitioner, functional medicine doctor, a lot of naturopathic doctors, chiropractors, health coaches, okay, they're going to run a specialty test because all of these specialty labs have developed the technology to test for some of these mold, toxin, or mycotoxin sort of biochemical markers. Either they can test for the specific toxin that's associated with specific molds, or as our body is detoxifying the mold toxin, there are certain metabolic byproducts that are generated in that detoxification process, and they can check for those metabolic waste materials. And it's not conclusive that it was generated during the mold detoxification process, but it's associated with that. So this is called OAT testing or organic acid testing, or they're looking for mycotoxin markers within the blood. So that's what you're going to get more so on the specialty lab testing side. Unfortunately, you're going to pay out of pocket for these tests. These tests are generally several $100s, whereas what your allergist orders is probably going to be covered by your insurance. So that's a plus. Depending on your plan, you might have minimal out of pocket. And then, depending on the specialty lab company that your natural medicine practitioner uses, the results may or may not be that accurate. Okay. This is, like I say, some specialty labs, those of us in the industry, we kind of share results. We, talk about stuff. We have our own brand of shop talk. And so we talk about, oh, yeah, I ran this test through this company and I got this back and I don't think it was right? So there's a little bit of a grapevine amongst us practitioners. And so some specialty lab companies have a good reputation, some a bad reputation. So then it really depends on, like, is your practitioner, are they up on things? Are they really certain that this is a really accurate company, or were they just kind of swayed by the marketing and now they're doing it? Like, how much due diligence did the natural medicine practitioner put in to really determining, is this a quality lab company that we're going to be sending your sample to? Okay, so I don't do a ton of specialty lab testing, but when I do, I'm very, very careful. I'm very meticulous around making sure that I have confidence in the particular company that I'm using. So when I get the marketing emails from these companies, sometimes I will just do a few little tests and say, okay, how can I calibrate this? Like, I don't have my clients do things, and this is just across the board. I don't have my clients do things that I have not tested and that I feel very comfortable with, and we're going to get consistent results and so on. So when you do, like, the organic acid testing, the mycotoxin testing, the validity of the results is going to vary depending on the specialty lab that your practitioner uses, or you might be ordering this yourself on the internet and really not having any idea the reputation or the track record of the lab that you're ordering it from. And then, what is it going to tell us? Okay, it's going to tell us that you have a toxin overload. Okay, I could have told you that based on your symptoms. And this is really where I get on my soapbox with any sort of specialty lab testing. The vast majority of specialty lab testing, whether it's adrenal testing, neurotransmitter testing, stool testing, mycotoxin testing, organic acid testing, okay, all of these specialty labs that people pay out of pocket hundreds and several $100s for, most of the time you can determine what the results are going to be just by understanding how to interpret your symptoms properly. Okay, so if you tell me, for 10 years I've had allergies and I've had brain fog, and when I wake up in the morning my joints and muscles are all stiff, I've had that for 10 years, and then I had a leak in my bathroom and I saw some mold growing there, and then within a month I started getting horrible migraines. I'm not saying, oh my goodness, we got a mold problem. I'm saying, oh wow, you've had a toxin overload for 10 years, right? And you finally, it got so overloaded that you started experiencing headaches and migraines. But all of that other stuff, the runny nose, the watery eyes, the bags under your eyes, the brain fog, the muscle pain and joint stiffness, you thought that was normal, right? You thought you were just getting older. You thought everybody starts to lose their memory. Everybody gets brain fog after they have kids. Everybody, you get older, your muscles hurt, right? You just thought all of that was normal, just sort of the natural progression. And, who doesn't have allergies in this day and age, right? So it's like you didn't think anything of it. But now you're thinking about the mold, okay? So, like I say, what I'm describing here is sort of like the very typical mold situation that most people are in. In rare instances, people do get exposed to very virulent, very toxic mold species, but they're not that common. This is what, like, people have been terrified by mold. They think that any mold that you encounter is one of these horrible, like, super toxic mold species, and that's just not the case. Mold is around us all over the place. It's coating everything. It's coating all of our food. It's everywhere. And most of it, just like all of the bacteria that's coating everything, right? That bacteria is not making you sick. It's not giving you bacterial infections, right? Because most little microbes, they're not going to make us sick. We are adapted to them. They're just part of the background environment, and they're not causing us a lot of sickness and harm if our body has what it needs to flourish in the environment alongside of them. Okay, this is the critical piece. But yes, there are some very virulent bacteria that can make us very sick. There are some very virulent molds that can make us very sick with their mycotoxins. So I'm not discounting that. If you say, but Dr. Leslie, I did get sick from mold. I hear you, right? If you've been exposed to a very, very toxic substance, maybe you didn't have a toxin overload. Maybe you were just fine. But if you're exposed to an extremely toxic substance, that's going to fill your bucket up immediately, and you're going to get sick from those toxins, right? But most people, they're having a slow build, okay? Their toxin bucket is slowly filling up, and they're gradually experiencing more and more lower level toxicity symptoms that they're not recognizing. And then finally, one day, poof, the bucket tips over and they go, how'd that happen? Now, how come I'm getting migraines? How come I'm getting so sick, right? And they're not realizing what has happened to them. So that's the vast majority of people. This is not to discount the people that are having an extreme exposure. I totally get it. Okay, if that's been the case for you, I totally understand. But whether it's kind of the more typical slow build or the rarer acute extreme exposure, the solution is still the same. Your body can process these toxins. It has the ability, it has the organ systems, the biochemistry, the physiology to do that. But your body has to have what it needs to run that biochemistry, to run that physiology. And that's what I talk about on this podcast when I talk about the 3 things your body needs, or I call them the 3 principles. So the 3 things your body needs to detoxify any toxin molecule, whether it's your own metabolic waste material or toxins that you make yourself, whether it's naturally occurring toxins in the environment, whether it's man-made toxins in the environment, your body has to have what it needs within those 3 principles in order to do that work. And if it has what it needs, it will do that work and it will drain that toxin bucket. So that's the good news. That's the hope that I want you guys to understand, okay? So even if there's an exposure, we can clear that exposure if our body has what it needs. So if you have listened to some of these symptoms that I described on this podcast and you're like, wait a minute here, she's talking about me. I have allergies, I have bags under my eyes, my brain is foggy, and my muscles hurt, and my joints hurt, and I thought it was normal. And you have migraines, right? Let's talk, okay? Reach out to me. I would love to talk with you on a free consult call. Let's talk about where you're at with your migraines and then all of these other symptoms too, right? Because I can tell you, I can go through, like we're coming up to springtime here in Chicago, and I'm pretty confident that I'm not going to have any seasonal allergies this spring. And that's because I'm not overloaded with toxins anymore like I was when I was 14 and 15 and on and on and on. Okay, so gotten rid of that load, and so now when it's May here, I'm not sneezing and in agony and having spontaneous nosebleed. So let's see if that's a possibility for you. If I think I can help you, I will tell you that. If I think I'm not a good fit for you, I will tell you that too and try to point you in a good direction for you. So you can book that on my calendar by following the link in the description. So I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope that this alleviated some of the anxiety that's really been ramped up around mold, okay? And this is really marketed to migraine sufferers now all the time. I see it getting more and more frequent, where if there's a migraine sufferer, oh, we got to test for mold. It's mold. It's mold. It's probably mold. It's probably mold. And unfortunately, it's coming from companies wanting to sell a product. Okay, so let me know what questions you have. You can join my free Facebook group called Healing Migraines Naturally with Leslie Caesar, ND. And we've got 12,000 women who want to restore their health and stop getting migraines in that Facebook group. It's a really great Facebook group. And you can ask me questions in there, and I can cover them on future podcasts and get those questions answered for you. So we'd love to have you join us there. So have a great day, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.